One of my favorite things to do, both in the hobby in general and also here on my YouTube channel, is fun little challenges. Things like painting super tiny, using an unusual color scheme, or even painting something that's not really supposed to be painted. And all of these projects are not only super fun to do, but secretly they also kind of push me to either improve one of my skills or just make me look at miniature painting in a whole new light. But one thing I've never really tried, despite my love for the game, is the classic, dirty, grimy, and grimdark style of painting known as Blanchitsu. So when I recently got the honor of being given some of these beautiful John Blanche miniatures for his new swashbuckling dueling game En Garde, obviously my first thought was, finally, a chance for me to try my hand at painting Blanchitsu style on some very authentically Blanchitsu looking miniatures. So imagine my shock and delight when John himself said, "No, Louise, what I think would be better is if you painted this miniature in your own bright and colourful style, but with a couple of very specific twists to make it look just right." So here we are today, and in this video I have been officially tasked with painting this quintessentially grimdark miniature in my own quintessentially ungrimdark style. And whilst doing my best to follow an agreed upon artistic vision, I end up running into a bunch of unique and sometimes kind of fun challenges along the way, which to my surprise may have actually ended in me painting what I think may be one of my favourite miniatures ever. Did it do? Downwards whoosh, into the sea. I don't know, let's go. This formidable, even when unassembled, femme fatale is Mi'Lady Carmilla, the Guardianess of the Deep, who is a character featured in John Blanche's new grimdark swashbuckling dueling game, En Garde. En Garde is set in the baroque, macabre, and opulent seafaring city of Theray, a place where the world's finest and most cunning sword and pistol masters congregate to determine who is the greatest duelist living or undead. And indeed, by the looks of the 3 characters that I've been sent and built so far, they all seem dank, frantic, at some point well dressed, and not altogether alive, in of course the best possible way. The miniatures, such as the one I'm building here, are all traditionally sculpted and produced at 54mm scale, making them a little bit bigger and more similar to ranges like Inquisitor. And admittedly, I've never actually built or painted anything Inquisitor or 54mm scale before, so this is going to be a brand new experience for me and another little challenge. Yay. But yeah, the game and its miniatures as well are all being sculpted, painted, illustrated, and written by what I would consider to be a tabletop miniature dream team of sorts. With legends like Tumas Piriran of Mordheim and Trench Crusade fame, renowned sculptor Paul Hicks, unsettlingly talented illustrator Thomas Elliott, and of course the prime visionary John Blanche at the project's helm. Now, whilst I managed to get my own grubby little paws on these miniatures early because of my "these guys are my friend" privileges, you too can support the project, back its creators, and also get your hands on these miniatures as well, as the project is currently up on Kickstarter. However, if you're watching this video a little bit later on, then don't worry, because late pledges are a thing, and I'm sure with all the hype this game is receiving already, it'll be no time until you can support En Garde and its creators to your heart's content, and look forward to more awesome miniatures like this lady here coming out real soon. But with my chosen character all cleaned up in its various sub-assemblies, this is where I'd usually grab my brushes and paints and just do whatever I wanted to hopefully end up with something kind of alright looking. But this time the miniature's lead visionary had a bit of a plan for me. A wee while ago, to my great surprise and my even greater thing that makes me a little nervous but excited but in a good way, I was invited round to visit John Blanche Blanche with my friend Tom, who runs the YouTube channel Film Deg Miniatures, and we stopped by just to say hi, have a little cup of tea and some biscuits, and chat about fairies, friends, and miniature painting, obviously. But specifically, I had a little chat with John about the miniature I was most excited to paint out of his new En Garde range, which of course was the beautiful Mi'Lady miniature that I just showed you. And I was delighted to hear that not only was he quite keen for me to paint the miniature, but also that he had quite a clear vision and sort of direction that he wanted me to go with the miniature as far as the paint job went, which I absolutely love. I love getting a little bit of artistic direction on a project or a miniature, and obviously receiving it from John Blanche was a massive privilege and very cool. So here is what he said. He said that he would like her to be in my own style and definitely not be Blanchitsu looking, be painted in some soft mid 18th century pastel tones which resembled the ladies' fashion at the time, and very specifically, I was to use absolutely none of my usual bright pink paints. He'd seen my painting style before and obviously picked up on my love for being just really obnoxious with my color choices. And initially, I kind of laughed and I was like, okay, sure, yeah. And he was like, no, I'm serious. Don't touch those pinks. And I was all, well, damn. I guess it really is a challenge now. And those were my instructions straight from the man himself. So let's prime up this miniature and hopefully bring this vision to life. No pressure, right? So a weird fact about me is that I am always a save the best for last kind of girl until it comes to miniature painting, and for that very reason, I was compelled to start by doing all of her skin first, just so that I could start painting her face as soon as I possibly could, because I don't know, I just love painting faces. It's always like the cherry on top of the cake when I'm painting miniatures. And no, technically, I am not just using pink right away here. It looks a bit more pink on my camera, but it's actually a nice desaturated purpley tone, which I kind of mixed up on the fly because I wanted her to look a little more cool-toned and vampiric like her lore dictates. So there. Yeah. But yes, since this lady looks like she's stepped right out of a Victorian era royal portrait, and because I know she's probably keen to put a bit of ferocious life back into her cheeks before she steps out to duel in the morning, I decided to set this face apart from any other lady face that I've ever painted before by going quite hard and heavy on her makeup. I blended in some very opulent and expensive looking blue glazes all the way up to her sharp eyebrows. I lined her eyes quite heavily in some black eyeliner, and of course I put some chalky white powdery looking makeup around her cheeks as well to really emphasize that powdery mercury look of the era that I was trying to replicate. Then just to add a little bit of spice, I popped a wee heart on her cheek as well, which, fun fact, was something that ladies in the 17th and 18th centuries did for a bit of fun, and these were called mooches or moushes, I don't really know how to pronounce it, and depending on where you put your little symbol, it meant different things. And I think a heart on the left cheek, like what I've done here, actually means that the lady in question is engaged to be married. Married to the sea and the love of dueling, I'm sure. Anyways, whilst I was super happy with her face and her skin and her makeup, with no hair or any other features to balance it out, it was looking a little bit stark. So I went straight into some of the other features that frame her face, like this mighty golden chin and head guard combo thing. I'm not super sure what it is, but I like it a lot, and as always, it was a great excuse for me to practice my non-metallic metallics, which actually ended up looking really nice on this headpiece thing, I think. Then for the hair, which I wanted to be a very classic looking grey-white powdered wig, I started to do something a little bit unusual for me, and I incorporated a lot of very cool blue tones. Usually I like to paint with very warm tones like yellows and reds, and I especially love mixing basically every single color with light yellow to make all of my highlights, and often for that reason I'm worried that my paint jobs can come out a little bit samey looking. So for this lady I decided to try and throw caution and all my usual painting fallbacks to the wind and really commit to doing my my best to make this a more cool-toned looking miniature. And at this point, as I moved on to this awesome little ship-like merman hair decoration on her head, I was doing a lot of trust the process because I hadn't really made a plan for this miniature, nor had I done a digital color scheme mock-up like I usually do. I was going into this unusual new scale of miniature completely blind, and to be honest, I was a little bit scared. But fortunately for me, it was here as I was painting up her merman hat that I was like, oh my gosh, these blues and greens really suit her, and our girl is definitely a cool summer. And this revelation came just in time because it was time to move on to arguably the most important part of the whole miniature in my opinion, which was her beautiful clothes. Sure, this lassie is a little scantily clad at the front, but what she is wearing, including the awesome golden fish bra here, is absolutely gorgeous, wonderfully sculpted, and it has so much detail put into it too. So I knew that I wanted to push myself here to make sure that her fashion became a key feature of the entire paint job when it was finished. I looked up some mid-18th to 19th century color palettes for inspiration and landed on these pastel pistachio greens and sea blues as the main colors I wanted for her bodice, which I thought were not only really pretty colors that go really well together, but also a perfect callback to her kind of almost mermaidy sea-themed getup. And of course I free-handed in some very Victorian looking stripes on her corset too, because it looks cool and I like painting stripes on clothes whenever I goddamn get the chance to. And also, yes, I did end up changing a bunch of the colors on the details like the bows and her pants like 3 times until I felt I got the right balance of colors, because pants are in fact a very important fashion accessory, especially when they are a large percentage of what you're wearing. Anyways, moving down the mini, I decided to use similar colors to paint her leg cover things, which I painted to be a little bit iridescent looking with the blues in the shadows and this more yellowy sea green color in the highlights, kind of like a seashell or some pearls if you get the vision here. And again, I feel like for some reason I was just soaring through these non-metallic elements here. Like, look at the little faces I painted on the knees and also the weapons too on the arm sub-assemblies. I think they all look pretty good. I don't know, something was just kind of clicking for me on this mini where usually I really struggle with non-metallics. So yay me, I guess, for sticking to it, learning, and also seeing some improvements too. Let's go progress. Let's go me. For the sleeve elements on the arms, I really wanted them to be this super bright white to once again try and sell the image of those 18th century female portraits with their stark and fluffy white sleeves sticking out of their silky dresses. But because she is a little bit on the undead side of things, I couldn't have them looking too perfect or bleached. So I opted for this slightly sickly bluish undertone to them, which I think worked out perfectly. But with the main body all polished off, it was time to move on to one of our very defining and quintessentially John Blanche features, which is that gorgeous, big, hairy bustle. God, I hate every word I just said there. Now, I really struggled to paint sculpted hair on even a good day, so I decided to do something I rarely ever do these days and help myself out a little bit by giving this part a zenithal prime before painting. All I did here was spray the whole thing black, then spray the underside purple, and then do a top-down spray with a kind of off-white grey color, which created this pre-shaded purpley white gradient, which is already kind of the color I wanted, like a purpley, fluffy ostrich feather sort of thing. That was the plan here. And as you can see, I'm still going into it and adding in some more purpley shadows and highlights, but yeah, I was really worried about how this area would turn out, and I'm still not sure if it's the best fluff I've ever painted, but fortunately for me, this area is also covered in a ton of gubbins to distract from what's underneath. And as you all know, I'm a gal that loves gubbins. I love gadgets and gizmos aplenty. I spent absolutely ages painting up this awesome skull belt of skulls and death and badassery, and also all of these tiny little gems and bows in some very royal looking jewel colors. But just to seal the deal that she is a lovely lady who is engaged to be married to a life of dueling skulls and the sea, I freehanded a tiny little love letter to the bottom of her skirt, maybe from her hunky vampire merman or maid other half. Who knows? And after I'd worked around some of the other very tiny and delightful last minute details on the mini, she was all done. But as usual, that never means she's like done, because now it's time for me to have a small creative aneurysm, somehow get over it, and try and figure out a way to base her so as not to make the whole miniature look bad. My favorite. Yay. A while ago, I painted up the lovely Hopman Frederica from Trench Crusade, and because I couldn't work out whether or not I wanted her on a plinth or as a playable miniature, I figured out a cunning way to get the best of both worlds and used a small magnet to secure her base to a plinth. And then I utilized this kind of vignette style in the middle of the base to blend the whole piece together. And I am definitely going to do the same thing here because I think it looks really cool, and it means eventually I can maybe play with this miniature too. But this time we are going to mix things up in the best and, in my opinion, the most fun possible way, because in order to make this base, I am literally going to go hunting for some buried pirate-themed treasure in this tiny box here. This is a little box of basing material which I got given at Spiel Essen last year by Kraut Cover Scenics, and I hadn't found an excuse to use it until this project here, and oh my gosh, I am so glad I am finally using it because it is so fun and so cool. Inside this box is a lovely array of tropical sand and little bits of driftwood, but most importantly, it is full of tiny treasures which make your base look like the beaches of a formidable pirate bay. And I picked through this box for like a solid 15 minutes, and I found bottles and coconuts and starfish and conch shells and little fishy bones, and most importantly, these entire tiny little miniature scale crabs. And as a high-key archaeology wannabe, this was indeed the most fun ever and extremely satisfying to do. So yes, I highly recommend this product. It was really good for my mental health that day. But anyways, I mapped out this rough sandy shape in the middle of the base with some glue, and I did a little dippy to get the layer of sand in, and then I spent some time strategically popping in all my little treasures to make a delightful scene for Mi'Lady. Now obviously painting all the little bits and pieces was super duper fun, especially the crab, but I wanted to make the whole base look kind of dark so as not to distract from the miniature on top, and in my opinion it didn't really end up looking very good. The green I was using in with all of the yellow of the sand was a little bit sludgy and unpleasing to look at, and it was giving less opulent Caribbean holiday and more rainy weekender in Skegness, which, while suitably grimdark, wasn't exactly what I was going for here. So yes, I may have repainted the base completely after I attached the miniature to it, but look, now it's way better, it fits the miniature much more, and there's no shame in changing your mind at the last second and just completely repainting part of your miniature if it doesn't quite fit. Trust me, it's fine. And speaking of which, it was time to add one more very small last minute detail to the miniature to kind of tie the whole thing together, which was this final tiny trail of blood coming off her extremely pointy rapier. And with that last little bit of flair and pizzazz, she was officially done. So let's take a bit of a closer look at this model and see if I managed to do this new, incredibly beautiful miniature some justice. My distinguished guests and fellow lovers of Grimdark, allow me to present to you all the beautiful and deadly guardianess of the deep, Mi'Lady Carmilla, and I think she may just be one of the loveliest miniatures that I have ever had the pleasure of painting. Like I said earlier, this is the very first miniature I have ever painted at this 54 or Inquisitor scale, and whilst I thought that she would take me much longer and maybe even be a little bit more difficult to paint given she's quite considerably scaled up from the size of mini that I'm used to, she actually painted up a tree, and I really managed to enter my flow state, and I got her all painted up in absolutely no time at all. And yes, she was also the most fun to paint as well, because as we all know, I love a miniature which is a little bit more on the feminine side, and getting the opportunity to paint all of these lovely frilly details, her stunning costume, and of course her well-powdered face was exactly my jam, and I think she turned out super pretty in the end. This very cool-toned and sea-foamy color scheme is definitely not something I typically reach for as well, so I'm really glad that I took a little bit of creative advice and guidance, because in the end I think it all came together really wonderfully, and I hope that you guys love her as much as I do too. But here I just want to say a huge thank you to the whole En Garde team for bringing this amazing miniature to life, and also to John Blanche specifically for believing in my own creative vision whilst also pushing me a little outside of my comfort zone, and of course for being an inspiration to literally thousands of us who admire him and his unshakable influence on the hobby that we all love. Thank you. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. I do hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye, friends. Bye. See ya. Bye. Bye.